Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're here on Treaty 6 territory, and I also want to acknowledge the Métis people of Alberta who share a very deep connection with this land. My name is Sarah Hoffman, and I'm the Alberta NDP Education Critic, as well as our Deputy Leader. And today I'm joined by Kyle Kasawski, who is the Alberta NDP candidate for Sherwood Park, and Bill Tonita, who's a Strathcona County Councillor and our Alberta NDP candidate for Strathcona-Sherwood Park. As well, of course, we're joined by our leader, Rachel Notley. This region is growing really fast. In fact, so many families love everything that Strathcona County has to offer that the county passed the population mark of 100,000 people in last year's census. More than 73,000 of those folks call Sherwood Park their home. As more and more families choose to live here, it's critical that we build all of the things that help communities thrive. And we're committed to supporting and advocating for public education. So of course, I'm going to say that public schools are necessary for all communities. And we're here today within shouting distance of Sherwood Heights Junior High School. Replacing that school has been the Elk Island Public Schools' #1 priority for years. It needs to be replaced. Sherwood Heights is one of the park's oldest schools. It opened in September of 1959. Just 4 years after Sherwood Park itself was established. And École Campbelltown is even older. These two schools have served their community well, but no amount of fresh paint or fixing the roof is going to accommodate the further growth that's needed for this fast-growing community of Sherwood Park. I think now is a great time to turn the mic over to Kyle.
Thank you, Sarah. As someone who grew up in the park, I've had the privilege of seeing this community blossom into a desired location for so many families and businesses. And now, as the Alberta NDP candidate for Sherwood Park, I've been out knocking on a lot of doors, and I've heard about how important it is to support public education and give your young people the best possible start in life. At a recent event I hosted with Bill Tonita and our Alberta NDP candidate for Strathcona-Sherwood Park, I was concerned to hear so many people share their stories of how unmanageable class sizes have become. We heard about a grade 4 class with 34 students in an elementary school, a grade 7 class in a junior high with 37 students, and a first-year teacher told us she has 27 students in a 5-6 combined, and 5 of them have high needs. That teacher does not have an educational assistant, and it's her and one of her students who have recently arrived from Ukraine that doesn't speak English yet. Situations like that are far too common in Alberta schools. We need to support students, staff, and families and get class sizes down and give teachers the tools they need to help all students be successful. I attended school in the park before going on to university, and my junior high years were spent here at Sherwood Heights. Although that was a long time ago, the school was old when I got there. I have so many great memories of playing rugby out in the park, or some version of it, school dances that always ended with Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven, and math class with Mr. Pohar and his outrageous ties. Sherwood Heights was originally listed on the division's capital plan as a modernization, but the school now requires a full replacement. Among other issues, the building has poor ventilation system, worn and rupturing water pipes, a gym that's smaller than Alberta's education design standards and actually smaller than most elementary schools have. It's time for students, staff, and families to create new memories in a brand new school where class sizes are appropriate and all the necessary supports are there. To help get us here, it's my pleasure to introduce our leader, Rachel Notley.
Well, thank you very much, Kyle. Thank you, Sarah, and of course, thank you, Bill. Amazing advocates for public education throughout our province. Supporting public education is definitely not a priority of Danielle Smith and her UCP government. You don't have to take my word for it. The evidence is clear. The UCP has driven up school fees and education taxes, even while they underspent the education budget by $1 billion over just the last 2 years. They also took PUF funding away from 5-year-old children with complex learning needs. And there are 1,000 fewer teachers in Alberta's classrooms than there were when we were last in government. And the UCP are forcing a widely discredited curriculum onto students, staff, and their families. Now, when we were in government, we funded an average of 60 school projects a year because they were desperately needed, and that need had been ignored for decades. But the UC's budget 2022 announced funding for only 12 school capital projects, only 6 of which were actually new schools. So I'm here to say that, should we form government after the coming election, we will fund the building of a new replacement school for students in Sherwood Heights and École Campbelltown. In our first year of government, that announcement will be confirmed. We will reverse the cuts and restore programs that supported students with disabilities and specialized learning needs. We will hire more teachers and educational assistants and provide more help for students to close learning gaps. These are important investments for young Albertans, setting them up to be successful in their careers and in their lives. An Alberta NDP government will be committed to properly funding classrooms, building schools, and creating a modern, inclusive, world-class curriculum students deserve that will set them up for a successful future. Thank you, and any one of us are happy to take your questions.
Thank you, and we'll go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder to press star 9 if you're on the phone, and use the raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. If you can say your name and your outlet at the top, we'll go to our first caller.
Good morning, it's Kyle Kasawski, Alberta today.
Morning.
So I'm looking at the Elk Island Public School Capital Plan, and it says that on March 4th, 2022, the government announced design funding, and they said the announcement is a strong indication of the project support by the Alberta government, and typically projects are approved for construction funding when the design has been completed. So I'm wondering, have you heard something to the contrary, that the government is not going to fund this project?
We haven't heard one way or the other. We do know that this has been the #1 priority for this school division since 2020. We also know that there have been no projects approved for this school division since this UCP government has been in office. And we know that other than a little bit of money for maintenance for these schools. So while they may have funded design funding, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go ahead and approve construction. And certainly their record, given that they have essentially invested in roughly 1/5 the number of schools that we were investing in, leads me to the point that people cannot count on them to follow through. Indeed, we have incidences of this UCP government making significant capital promises and commitments and then backing down on them. So we're here to say that if we commit to this school, just as with all the other capital projects that we have committed to in the past, it will get built. That's something that you can take to the bank.
Any follow-up, Catherine?
Yeah, so just to clarify, do you believe when you're approving these capital projects that the design work and the actual capital construction cost should be approved all at once, or does it make sense to fund the design first and see what you're working with?
It absolutely makes sense to fund the design first, Catherine, but funding the design does not mean that the decision to build and construct and move forward will necessarily follow the next year. They could end up dragging the puck for another 5 or 6 years. For instance, just yesterday, we talked about the South Edmonton Hospital that this UCP government committed to. They've spent $400 million on design work, yet the construction date has been put off by 3.5 years, and now it's been pushed off to an indefinite date with no guarantee of anything. So we have a strong history of the UCP ragging the puck on these things and promising things over and over and over while not delivering. And that's in contrast to our record of of delivering on the commitments that we make to communities.
We'll go to our next caller.
Hey, Tim Brooke here with CTV. Another question for Ms. Notley. The energy minister is holding some meetings today to talk about proposed tax breaks for oil companies who clean up their orphaned or abandoned wells. I'm just wondering, what's the opposition's stance on potential tax breaks for those companies, and how would an NDP government approach this growing problem?
Listen, this plan that the UCP government is going ahead with is one that Danielle Smith, frankly, is, I would argue, conflicted on. She was a lobbyist for a small group of oil companies on this plan back before she became premier. And the plan itself has been roundly criticized and rejected by a whole range of experts in the field, including the former energy minister, Sonia Savage. Why? Because we have a principle of polluter pay. We do not give people bonuses for cleaning up after themselves. And this program is designed to give bonuses to otherwise profitable companies that are simply choosing not to follow through on their obligations. And that is why experts across the board are opposed to it. Municipalities are opposed to it. Responsible producers are opposed to it. It sends the wrong message to those companies that have actually chosen to follow the law and live up to their obligations. So it's a bad idea all around, and it should be rejected. And Danielle Smith is pushing through a pet project for friends and insiders at the expense of taxpayers and law-abiding job creators.
Any follow-up, Tim?
Yeah, so what's the answer here? I chatted with a couple landowners today who say that they personally believe those companies, if they have these wells, they shouldn't be allowed to drill anymore. You know, they should essentially be forced to clean up old stuff before they head to any new things. Would that be NDP policy on this, or what do you propose? Because obviously this is a very long-standing problem that a number of governments have tried unsuccessfully to fix.
Well, I mean, there's different groups here. There's companies that are no longer profitable, that abandon their obligations. That's one set of problems. And then there's companies that are still profitable and increasingly profitable with where the price of oil is now, that are just ignoring their obligations. And with that latter group, what I would suggest is there is room for the AER to be more definitive and compel cleanup before additional work can carry on. So what we would do is engage in consultations involving the AER, as well as environmentalists, as well as landowner groups, as well as people within the industry, to come up with the best plan. But generally speaking, I think there are other tools at our disposal when it comes to profitable companies and their obligation to follow the law and fulfill their responsibilities.
Do one more pass for questions. Star 9 if you're joining us on the phone. Raise hand function if you're joining us via Zoom. And seeing none, that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.